Okay, I'm going to see if I can turn this into a Cahokia point. And call it a night. I think I can get the longest point if I kind of go diagonally like this. Oops. Let me see. Probably not a good idea to use a hammerstone. Sorry about the focus. There's some glare coming off of that too, it looks like. Now this particular piece of Hixton is a very high grade. So if the Hixton that you've got isn't flaking like this, don't worry. This is probably an unusual piece. Although if it does flake easily, you're going to run into what the issue I just had, where I just snapped off a major portion of it. Yeah, the hammerstone's a little bit too aggressive. The point I just made, you could probably make another one that just like it. But I'm going to try to make a thinner, a little bit thinner Cahokia point. This is kind of a generic style that you'll find all over the place. Not just in the archaeological record, but a lot of guys make that style. Modern knappers. This material is kind of slick. It seems like it would be rough because it's kind of grainy, but it's very slick. So I've got to control the pressure flaker so it won't slip. But it doesn't slip nearly as much as steel or copper. And yeah, copper does slip a little bit. One thing about natural materials is it is relatively spongy. These materials, even if you're using bone, you can feel a little bit of a difference as far as the sponginess of the tip of the tool. In dry weather, it's not really an issue, but in wet weather or humid weather, it can be an issue. You could lose a lot of your tool tip. It wears down very fast in humid weather. And you can really feel the sponginess. You may need to dry out your tool before you start knapping if you live in a humid climate. Here in this area, I live at the edge of a desert, so the dryness can be a good thing when it comes to your flint knapping tools. Not so good when it comes to bow making. And I got a request to make a bow on video. I've been wanting to do that for years. I just haven't done it. After I moved out here to West Texas, all of my staves became brittle, and I was breaking everything I was making. So I tried investing in some hickory and some osage, but it got kind of expensive, and I still broke those bows. I do have one that I made out of osage for myself that survived this dry weather. That was like 1 out of 4 that I made. Because I was living in Central Texas before, in the Austin area, and the weather is very humid there. So that's basically where I learned to seriously make bows. I've been making them since I was a kid, of course, but nothing serious. And I was using a lot of green wood too when I was young. I didn't know anything about seasoning the wood or drying it out, or the difference between the species, the properties of different wood species. Anyway, I got a request to do one on video, so eventually I am going to do one on video. I should have done that with indirect percussion instead of regular pressure. I gotta be careful with that tip. That flexible roll of leather is too risky. Yeah, I'm going to switch over to percussion because I can't generate enough power for some of these flake removals. I'm kind of in a hurry too. The secret for good Cahokia notching is to thin out the preform as best you can. Now this type of quartzite is finicky, so I might not be able to get as thin as I want. I can't find my mallet. Let's see. I'm gonna have to use one of my billets. Let's see. No. Okay, here it is. Again, like in the last video, I'm using that little notch to catch the edge. Little depression in the end of the flaker. That way it peels off the flake a lot better. Yeah. It seems like it needs a little bit of an extra pull on the flake to get it to come off. A lot of times I just use a rounded tip and with no notch, but I'm using that depression in there to grip the edge and add a little bit more pull to it. And being careful not to overshoot. Anytime you use a little bit of extra force, there is a risk of overshot. And hopefully I can use indirect percussion to get through that step fracture. Cool. Pushing my luck with the thinness, but I want to try to get as thin as possible. Yeah, that's about as thin as I dare to go. I'll have to thin the rest of it out with pressure. I'm afraid if I do any more percussion, I'll snap it. Okay. Now I've got various options on the pressure, various flakers. Let's see. I think I might use that one for the end stage. Might use, well, I've been trying to use ulna bone. This is what this is, an ulna, deer ulna, but it splits when I flake with it. So it may be the dry weather, or it might just be the technique that I use. But I can't get the ulna to work for me. Unless it's obsidian or something very delicate. Dacite or obsidian. I thought I had a mid-grade flaker, but I guess this is it. I could use antler tines, just a tine by itself, but for some reason I can't get a good grip on an antler tine. Yeah, it's working pretty good. To thin it, it's got to go past halfway, so it looks like it is going a little bit past halfway. Yeah, it's reacting pretty good. Although it does crush easily. You gotta be very careful with the edge. Make sure there's a platform. A little bit too aggressive there. Looks like you got some step fractures. Cahokias are kind of narrow, so I'm not too worried. I can make it more narrow if I need to get rid of those step fractures, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm afraid to break the tip off on this. Probably should do the tip at the very end. Yeah, I'll leave it to the very end. It's too easy to break off the tip by contact with the pad. If I make the tip perfect right now, I could end up breaking it off on the pad. Yeah, so aggressive pressure seems to be working pretty good. So you gotta watch the tip. When I'm doing this, it's right up against my finger. If it was thin, I probably would have snapped it off just then because I could feel it touching my finger. So I gotta make sure the tip is between the two fingers. I might be able to avoid that if I flake at an angle. But then I don't think the flakes travel as far. Okay, I'm going to put a lot of pressure on it this time. Let's see. Yeah, not bad. Yeah, with some passive pressure with a lot of force, worked out pretty well. Again, this is high grade. As far as Hixton quartzite goes, this is high grade. This is one of the best pieces in there. Or, you know, flakes from one of the best pieces that I have. So if you have some of this and it's not doing this, it's probably not you, it's probably the material. You know, if you're not getting good results, it's probably not you with this kind of stuff. I'm using a high grade piece right now. Alright, so that's about as thin as I want to go. I'm going to do the notching and then dress it up. I don't know if I'll be able to do it in under 30 minutes, but I'm going to try. I'll go as narrow as I can, but I'm limited by the flaker itself. I might be able to go thinner with a better, unusual piece of antler. But I think this will be sufficient. Cool. I shouldn't push my luck. taking down the edge to get the outline correct, and then if there's a place I can drive a flake to thin it down, that would be the time to do it, after I, dress up the edge and make it the right shape. This kind of thickens the edge. So it sets you up to dry flakes if you need to. And this seems easier than using the steel. Still have a little step fracture right there. I might be able to blow through that in a minute. Yeah, that's good enough. It's good enough for that little step fracture there. I just kind of pressed off a very aggressive flake and I blew most of it away. So now that I've got the overall shape, I see some thick spots I might be able to drive some flakes into to thin it down just a little bit more before I do the side notches. I'm going to do one thinning flake here where one of the side notches is going to go pretty close to that spot. And then up a little higher. Yeah, I wanted to get rid of that step fracture there. There's still a thick spot, so I'm going to try to drive one more flake. A couple more flakes. Let's see. Yeah, I was afraid of that, but I might be able to get it from the other side. Step fracture. Looks like I only got one shot at that. Okay. Ooh, it almost reached. Took a flake right there, it almost reached it. Maybe one more chance. Not quite. Damage control at this stage is hard. So close. Anyway, if I try any more, it's going to get way too narrow. Okay. Okay, we'll continue on the next video. Yeah, it's really easy to stall these notches when the entry is narrow. The only way I can get them deeper is if I expand the width of that notch. All those clicks you were hearing is just the antler being worn down. That last click was the only one that worked. Okay, so I was able to drive it much deeper with a wider notch. See how it goes on the other side. Yeah, it blew away part of the barb. Yeah, it's eating away at my antler tool. That worked. Worked for a little bit. I think I've already stalled it again. Nope. Cool. Okay, so not too much more. I don't want to push my luck on this one. Just one more pop out. should be sufficient. Then I can just dress up the edges and fix that point. Okay. Fix the tip. It's easy to shape it, but to shape it and sharpen it at the same time is a little bit challenging. And I think a lot of these Cahokia points had the stems or this area straight, right? Straight, parallel, and not following the blade. I think the blade went at an angle, and then when it got to the notch, it went straight down, right? So that's what I'm doing with this one. And the sides on these Cahokias, I think, were very straight. So I'll make it as straight as possible. Yeah, it's somewhat easy to shape the tip, the very tip, but to get it sharp, make sure it's sharp, is the hard part. You know, make sure the sides of the very tip are sharp instead of just round it off. You can kind of fake the delicate tip by just rounding it off, you know, grinding it a little bit with the pressure flaker to get it very sharp and pointy. I mean, very pointy, not necessarily sharp. But to get the edge sharp right at the tip, that's the trick. I'm going to kind of zigzag it a little bit, and it's hard to see. I think I have a little bit of a bulge there that I'm not going to be able to get rid of. See, there's a little bulge there, right there. I guess I can sharpen it. Yeah, in a minute I'll sharpen the antler and see if I can get into that area and remove that little bulb at the very, very tip. Might have another chance to get rid of that step fracture now that I'm getting close to it. Yeah, I'm getting some opportunities to thin out the blade a little bit, drive some flakes. All right, let's see if I can drive a flake into that area one more time. There we go. Cool. All right, so I'm going to sharpen the flaker so I can get to that tip. And push my luck one more time on this. That might be too pointy, but oh well. Let's see. If I zigzag it, I should be able to get that little lump off the tip. Let's see. There's a little lump right there. Those drive me insane. Well, it was good while it lasted. Hopefully this new tip won't have any lumps, right? So now you know what not to do. Just leave the tip alone, and every time you look at it with the little lump, you just say, if I tackle that lump, I will not have a tip. Alright, so now that I have a chance to make things a bit better on this one, take advantage of the fact that I started from scratch on this tip. Should be lump free. Okay, I'll stop messing with it. I like this tip better. Nice and smooth all the way around, and nice and sharp all the way around. Not as long as before, so the point doesn't look as slick as it could have looked, but it's okay. It's Hixton Quartzite, so I have an excuse. So now I'm just working on the symmetry. And I did see a couple of thick spots on the edge. Anyway, let's see. Now some Cahokias had extra notches, right? Let's see. I'll put an extra notch in this one. Right? Okay. So there you go. Nice translucent material. Hixton can be difficult to work, right? But as long as you don't overdo it. You know, I made the notches on the side a little bit wider than I would normally make them, compared to the narrow entry. You can see a difference there. So, you know, don't try to make one of these on this type of material and you'll be fine. It would have been about the same length if I hadn't broken off the tip. Right? Well, I only broke off about that much. So this one is longer. Okay. And here's the other Hixton point. So it may be a little bit too large for an arrow point. And again, I don't know what you call that. I'll look it up and see if there's one that looks like that in the archaeological record. But we all know what Cahokias look like, so there you go.